Everybody. My name is Stacy Renee. I'm a mindset coach, a life on life's terms coach. I don't know what happened to my hair. Anyway, welcome to Storytime with Stacy this Sunday. We're going to be exploring today what we've been exploring all week, the need for boundaries and how when we've, struggled with childhood trauma, how we may have problems developing boundaries, how we may have uncomfortability setting boundaries and why. So I'll give you all a few minutes to jump on here. I know myself. Hello, Five Elements Infinity. How are you this morning? I know myself. I struggled with boundaries and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know even who I was sometimes because I would just try. I would be trying all the time, it seemed like I was always trying. And so, good day. So it was really hard, and I couldn't learn boundaries all by myself because growing up, I did not learn boundaries. It wasn't even talked about really. They did start coming into play, but my family didn't know about boundaries. They had just started at Melody Beatty when Betty Ford, I remember when President Ford was in there, and Betty Ford went to, all right, excellent. When Betty Ford went to rehab, and so she created her own rehab. Good morning, Don Woodland. How are you this morning? So when Betty Ford went to rehab and started understanding these things, and then she, got Betty Ford Hazelton, the boundaries, codependency was finally recognized as something that people who struggled with addictions had troubles with. So codependency is oftentimes why we choose who we choose that test our boundaries. So we've talked about not being a victim or villain, not being in that situation to where we're victim or villain in the past week. I'm waiting on some more people to get on here before I start looking at the notes. And just good to see you today. Let me put my glasses back on. There was something on my glasses, Don. Trying to fight so hard. Are you praying? I know that, and I don't tell people who or what to pray to, but I know for me, when I've been fighting, the peace comes from with my prayers for me, you know, is that will give me peace. Sometimes I have to pray not to obsess on the problem, whatever I perceive the problem is. I was walking this morning I've already been walking to the store. It is hot down here near Cancun, Mexico. It is hot. All right, that's going to help, Don. Just, praying, we have to have belief. If I'm praying for something and then faith, the belief I think comes with the creativity is that for me, I pray for creativity. And that's that magic, and the belief. You have to believe in magic to receive it and to be open. And so there's creativity. So it's this childlike spirit that prays, is remembering our child, our inner child. As I was walking to the store today, I was thinking back when I was 6 years old. What was I doing? Who were my friends? Who was I closest to? When I was 7 years old, and to understand that all of us growing up in childhood trauma have different realities. I didn't even think about those realities until I think my baby brother told me about a year ago, because I was the oldest and the only girl. And so I had two little brothers. And so my baby brother said, we kind of got left behind, Stacy. You kind of got to do everything. Because, like, I got to go and spend the night with my grandparents. I got to go spend the night with my granny who died when I was 6. I got to, I was the first dead person I had touched, and I touched her in her casket. And she was cold. And remember that freaked me out. Hi, Jay Chang. This channel is about healing, healing childhood trauma. My specialty as a mindset coach or life coach is in addiction recovery, codependency, and grief. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, Jay Chang, is we're going to be talking about boundaries and how and why we did not develop them, how we can learn to develop them, because a lot of times people that grew up in childhood trauma learned skewed boundaries. They learned fight to fight, in that. Hello, Area of 7 Lifts. Yay, it's good to see you. Those are a lot of books behind me. Those are actually my best friend's books behind me. I have books in front of me that I have read. I have not read all of those books, but I bet she has pretty much so. So, anyway, so yeah, we're going to be talking about boundaries today. Thank you all for being here. Your dad died when you was 1 year old. What does that mean? Did you grow up for a longing for a male figure in your life? You know, a lot of times we grow up with this longing and not knowing, you know, when we lose somebody, is we want somebody to fill that place because we see other kids with these. You know, I know that for me, I didn't lose a dad when I was 1. But I know that I had friends that lost their dads early on, and they were always felt, you know, like when there was dad things, Boy Scouts and things like this, they felt kind of isolated. You were intimidated by the wall of knowledge. She's very brilliant and smart, my best friend. She's a, you know, a lawyer, so she knows a lot. You had 9 brothers, Jay Chang. Wow. Yeah, you had some role models. That's good that you had some role models. Because that's the thing is that we will model what we see growing up without realizing it. And a lot of times in modeling what we see growing up, we're really working from the energy of I don't want this. And so we get hyper focused on that. And our central nervous system is playing a part in that without us realizing it. We're, you know, when if you grew up in childhood trauma, I grew up in some trauma, and sometimes I felt like an accessory to the crime. Sorry to oh, you're not bothering me, Don. No, we love having you here. Thank you for being here. So I grew up feeling like because my parents, I never knew when all hell was going to break loose, you know, and so my mom would sometimes take off really fast, and me and my brothers they just have to take off too. So this developed a dysregulation of our nervous systems, and this also, you know, it's not just us. I wasn't the only one that grew up that way because our parents just didn't know back then what we have access to now. And of course, I tried to heal my children's pain, not to be doing that with my children, not to be going back and forth, because this makes the child insecure also. So if you deal with insecurity, you may have trouble setting boundaries. So we're going to talk about which role are you? Which role are you playing? Because if you have insecurities, then you know you could have developed those from childhood too. If your parents, like my parents, split up and went back together, split up and went back together, so it's like, okay, we're leaving because we don't feel safe, and then we're coming back because we do feel safe, and then we're leaving because we don't feel safe, and then we're coming back because we do feel safe. So you see what I mean? That causes a fragmentation and a dysregulation, and neither of my parents intended that. They were both very young themselves when they got married because back in the days, people used to think that you just get out of high school if you make it that far and get married, you know, done. It can be passed down. Yes, it can. And both of my parents got married very young. They were 16 and 18 when they got married, and they were both trying to escape home and go play house and make a better house. And that's what we do. That's what we do. I know I tried to do that too. You know, I did. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. I got married at 19 years old, and it didn't last. We didn't live together for 3 months after that. I mean, it was 3 months, and then and he did a lot of the same things that my dad did. My dad didn't even approve of me getting married to him. Girl, I know you're here, though, when I see those hearts flying. Welcome, welcome, Kim. Welcome, Angie. So we're going to talk about who are you? What did that childhood trauma? We try to think that away as adults. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to be like this. You know, I'm going to hold on tighter or I'm going to let go more, you know, depending on what your childhood trauma taught you. And, you know, a lot of people don't even recognize that it was trauma because maybe wasn't physical. Maybe it was just mental and emotional. Maybe it was just you trying to figure things out. Hello, Aruna Swal. So I want to thank you all for being here this morning. If any of this resonates with you today, please, you know, consider subscribing to this channel. I want to thank you all for choosing to spend your time here and for liking this video and subscribe if it resonates, because this is kind of like I said, I'm a mindset coach, a life coach. I work with addiction recovery, codependency, and grief. Those are my specialties. So that's typically what we're going to talk about on here because it's all interrelated and everyone is going to deal with at least one person who's dealing with that if they are not themselves. Okay. And that's how sometimes I ended up seeking recovery, because I might not have been seeking it for me. And codependency, we may be seeking recovery for somebody else, and we may not even know what codependency is. A lot of times we aren't aware of what that is. So that's what I try to inform people about here. So this morning's story is called Survival Roles, that we learned from childhood and our story time today. So I'm going to have two examples at the end of this, but I'm going to go over our notes for the week of what we talked about this week in case somebody's new here and hasn't seen or heard what we talked about this week. Don, that's what I did when I was 21. I moved into with my first fiance. Yes, and you had hoped probably that it wasn't going to be like what you saw growing up, and I don't know what you saw growing up. But I know for me, I'd hoped things would be different, even though my daddy didn't go to my funeral wedding because he said he called that man a thug. He's like, he's a thug, Stacy. And guess what? He was. He was. So, and we got married in the graveyard. So that's why I say my wedding funeral. I mean, there's a comedian that says, there's your sign, right? Gears, I'm glad you made it to work. Okay, Don, so hard. It is hard. Healing from these things, though, are a journey. We don't try to, Angie, I know, right? The things we do, trying to, and that thug husband was in defense of my father. I was going to show my father. See, sometimes we're doing these things when we haven't healed our childhood trauma, trying to prove, trying to show somebody. Just F around and find out, all right? So sometimes the joke's on us, like somebody said. Yes, the joke's on us, Gears. So, yeah, it backfires. So here we grow. Did I prove it? Girl, I proved a lot of stuff without proving it. I was working on it. I was trying to prove it, but every time it went and so it started trying to tell me, I started learning I'm the common denominator here. I'm the common denominator. I used to think I was innocently and blindly walking into this stuff. I wasn't innocent and I wasn't blind, and I didn't know about the need to heal. It wasn't that, because at the same time I was innocent and I was blind, but it was just by myself. You know what I mean? But I learned to play a role that I was innocent and that I was blind. So let's get into talking about that. Anybody else I don't know what happened. I did. So we're wrapping up this week by what we learned. So I've got my notes here. Absolutely. I'm the common. Thanks, Angie. I know I'm not the only one. I know. So yes, Kim, I got called out on proving it, right? Yes. Just like I do, because I had to learn it. I had to learn that what I was doing, because I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know because my central nervous system was running the show. I was trying not to have this happen and giving so much energy to not having that happen. I was trying hard not to be abandoned, but guess what? It didn't matter what I tried. I still got abandoned. So I had to learn, Stacy, why are you giving them the power to have a one-sided relationship? Been in some horrific relationships, still sore and single for a long time now. Yes, girl, because you deserve to heal. Because you have proved, when I'm talking about proving it, there's a negative proof and a positive proof. And a lot of times, we may have been doing the negative thing, trying to prove it, but the thing that we did that was negative, right, Kim? The thing that we did was negative gave us some strength. So when I'm working with people, we're talking about building mental muscles and emotional stamina because it has worn us out and left us feeling defeated. But at the same time, trying to prove our worth, we learned a lot of things. And so in learning these things, we became very capable people. But the reality is that as long as we're trying to prove it, we don't recognize it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because I did not recognize it. I would be proving shit all the time, and I did not recognize my worth. It did not give me my worth, what I could prove that I could do. Kim, until we fix ourselves, we can't know. You're exactly right. Thank you, darling. Okay. I am glad that you are here, Avilo. I can't say, but I have people that are friends from Israel. I don't talk about politics. I have friends from all over the world, and I do not talk about politics here. I don't talk about religion. And we sure don't talk about my age up in here. I think it's great when people are spiritual. We do talk about prayer, but I don't tell anybody who, what, or how to pray. That's their business. Their relationship with their source is their own business. It's not mine. I'm just here to help offer insights, thoughts and perspectives to help others get, into their own thoughts and perspectives so that we aren't trying, because we're trying to heal without really knowing that what's underneath that. So that's what we're doing today. So in our notes, back to the notes. Thank you all for being here. Nothing wrong with being 28 and gorgeous. Ha, right? Thank you, Kim. I just love you. So many of us didn't grow up learning healthy boundaries. That's the truth. That's the truth. We didn't even know that we need them. Maybe we grew up learning that when we did the right thing, when we did a good thing, we got, recognized. But when we did a bad thing, it didn't feel like we were loved. So we kept overperforming. I'm going to talk about the characters. Many of us learned dysfunction, extremes, emotional reactivity, overfunctioning, caretaking, people-pleasing, passivity, passive aggressiveness, guilt, and obligation. So earlier this week, we talked about the difference between obligation and appreciation, that you can appreciate somebody, that somebody can do something nice for you without you having to overgive, that you are worthy of having nice things done for you, and to accept that. See, a lot of people that I work with love to give, but they're not good acceptors. Hello, good morning, Robbie. It's good to see you this morning. So we also talked about how we learn how to think, analyze, anticipate, and survive. This is what childhood trauma does. Now, like I said, you don't have to have physical trauma to have childhood trauma. That just dysregulation, that disconnection from your parents or your caregivers, or you might not have had childhood trauma. I work with some people who consider themselves to have had healthy childhoods, but maybe were in an abusive relationship at one time. So many of us did not learn how to process our emotions, even when we came from the best well-meaning homes. It's sometimes because of the past learned behaviors. They might have been children who were taught to be seen and not heard. They may also have been taught that when they cried, which is a natural body function, when they cried, they were told, if you cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Or, knock it off, suck it up. These kind of things. Dried up. That's what they said, right? Dried up. So the child's feelings did not get recognized, whether they're right or wrong. So you can recognize them when they're little children or when they get as big as you. They're going to still be carrying that. I know that many times my daughter carried pain, and I had to sit there and hold her hand as a teenager. I would hold her hand while she fussed at me and everything else, and I didn't agree with what she was telling me. And I would have to sit there and pray, Stacy, keep your mouth shut. Stacy, keep your mouth shut. Because to her, that was her reality, you see. So sometimes I could tell her that I disagreed when she would be yelling at me, but if she was crying, I didn't try to make it worse. So this week we talked about the difference between judgment and discernment. I also didn't co-sign things either. So my mama cried with me too, but she would bust somebody. She would co-sign and she would pop somebody. She wanted to fight somebody. And, neither of us knew how to handle some certain problems. But, mothers don't like to see their children in pain. Most don't. So appreciation and obligation, we learn the difference between these things. Reacting and processing. We learn the difference between control and self-respect. Hello, Shanakia 7. So we talked about how boundaries are not punishments, threats, ultimatums, or rejection. See, I am doing well, thank you. So a lot of us feel like we're afraid to set boundaries because we're afraid of the other person feeling rejected. Do you think she, as a child spoilt it, can go into their adulthood and act like spoilt child in adulthood body? Yes. Yes. We have two parents. So even if one parent tries to be calm in everything, the other parent may not be calm. The other parent may rage. the other parent, yes, on Zoom, Shanokia 7. I'll send you the link here shortly. The other person may may rage. The other parent may even be destructive with furniture. So you're going to have a child who, if the other parent is doing this, they are going to be dysregulated too. And I think that my mother tried to fix a lot of the pain from my father. So she went over in one direction, and my dad, resentful that she did that, went over in his directions. RC, well, thank you, but I'm not on here to date, darling. Okay. All right. You can never correct another person. You can only correct yourself. That's true. We have to fix ourselves. We cannot fix somebody else. That's true. Thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, RC. So we talked about how boundaries are not punishments, threats, ultimatums, or rejection. Boundaries are clarity. Boundaries are self-respect. Boundaries are a language of love. And boundaries help us to honor ourselves while we honor someone else. It's to be respectful, because when we respect ourselves, we know how to respect someone else. So that's oftentimes, yes, good cop, bad cop. Exactly, Robbie. Like undermining, and undermining is never good for a child. It may feel good when this person over here is taking up the slack for this person over here, but then we get into that victim villain status. And so then we may pattern our life that way, of a victim villain. So I don't like us to pattern our lives that way. I can't make y'all stop patterning your lives that way, because like was said, we can't change anybody else. But I do like to bring awareness to that if that was a pattern that you saw growing up, you might have imprinted that pattern unconsciously. Thank you, Veer Shaverstrad. I hope I said that close to right. So boundaries help us to honor ourselves while we're respectful of others. See, because the thing is if we don't have boundaries, how many of us did things and were overwhelmed and had too much on our plate because we thought that's what we were supposed to do? And then we would go talk smack about somebody when we did all this for them and they didn't even come close to matching up to our expectations. You see, sometimes people talk about things, but they don't do things. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people. It means, though, that we need to have boundaries with those people. I talked to a friend last night about people always asking her for money. And I had to learn. I had a spiritual teacher who used to say, can I afford it? Can I afford it mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, or financially? And if any of those are checked no, well, then the answer needs to be no. And if you're not sure, to say, I don't know, let me think about it, and then really give it some thought and see if you change your mind. Give yourself a whole day, though, not 5 minutes. See, we get this sense of urgency when our central nervous system is amped up, anticipating, and we're afraid that if we don't, how we're going to look. Because when we really say, I'm afraid they're going to feel rejected, think about it. We are really afraid of how we're going to look. Sammy. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sammy. Prayers for you for your healing journey. So we get to learn to honor ourselves so that we can, not be a victim, villain, not feel put out when we have boundaries. How many people feel put out from not having boundaries? I know I did. Put out and put upon. And I would think the audacity of them to ask me to do another thing, even though they didn't know how much I committed to. I would start judging people who didn't know. So we learned that how to get past that and how to do the emotional processing is breathing, pausing, and also having support. Because sometimes we don't know when people are talking crazy to us, or we feel like they're talking crazy to us. If we haven't recognized that we might have grown up in verbal abuse, they might indeed be talking crazy to us. And we may feel that on our soul, because you came here worthy, valuable, and divine. You don't need to be anything else other than who you came here to be. But sometimes we forget when we grow up in childhood trauma what our roles are. So keep listening. We're going to get into the roles. So sometimes healing requires the support of a trusted friend, coach, counselor, therapist, or clergy. to help us to process our fears, our wounds, the stories, so that we can respond clearly rather instead of reacting reactively, right? So before we move into our story, let's remember something important. These are often adaptations. They're not random. The experiences, the struggles we experience as adults, they're how we might have adapted in childhood, the stories that we're telling ourselves. Lohit, no, I'm not Catholic. We don't talk about religion here. I like the Catholic faith just like I like a lot of faiths. All of them have something good, and then all of them have something to be desired, I think. I think that a lot of them are not accepting, and that's what this channel does, is we accept people of all faiths here. We just don't push it on anybody. Belief system is very important, but we don't push our beliefs on anybody else over here. No. So ways of surviving, coping, belonging, gaining approval, avoiding pain, reducing conflict, or trying to feel safe in environments that may not feel emotionally secure. If you grew up with a parent who had mental illness, if you grew up with a parent who had addiction, if you grew up with a parent who was emotionally immature, if you grew up with a parent who had narcissistic traits, we may feel like we just keep experiencing them over and over in life, and we may think that that's what life is. Because there's nothing wrong with you. You're not stupid. You're not lazy. There's nothing wrong with you. We just didn't learn a different way yet. That's all. I know I used to think those things, but I just hadn't learned a different way yet. So we have to learn a different way to be a different way, just to be our positive side, because your soul already knows. See, that's the confusion. We may feel torn and confused many times in decision making. That in itself is dysregulating, because our soul says one thing, but our ego says another. Your soul really doesn't want another person to feel rejected. Thank you, Robbie. But also your ego doesn't want you to look bad. You see what I'm saying? When you set a boundary. So I work with the ego and the soul in creating harmony in between. And when I'm coaching people, is we want to create harmony. Recognize these things that might have been considered shame-filled. Good morning, Pammy. Good morning. How are you doing today? Kimmy's in the house. Kim's in the house too. So it's good to see you ladies. And Angie and Dawn. And then we have some men here too. Robbie, for sure. And Sammy's here. And I don't know who else is in here. But anyway, I am so glad you all are here. I know Shanakya was here, and so is Five Elements. Doing better. Good deal. Good deal. I'm glad. So we become what we believe we need to become to survive our environment. If you grew up in any of those environments. Hi, Fajan Hamad. So some of us may have grown up the caretaker. You feel like you have to take care of everybody. That might have been your role as a child, as a teenager, and as an adult. You might have been the peacemaker. You might have had to suffer in silence just to keep the peace. You might have been the achiever, always having to prove that you're worthy. The perfectionist, always having to make things be perfect, walk on those eggshells. Or you might have been invisible just to keep from. Thank you, IRAP. I appreciate that. If this resonates with any of y'all, please do subscribe. I appreciate that. So you might have become the invisible one just to keep from rocking the boat and getting in trouble, right? Or you might have become the rebel. See, I was good until I wasn't, and then I decided to be bad because I just freaking wanted some attention, right? That's all. I was the oldest. I'm a Leo. I wanted some attention. Damn it. That's all. So I became the rebel too. I dated guys that, I knew would make my dad mad, marry them in the cemetery, but I also dated the guys that had the T-shirts on that says, "I'm the one your mother warned you about." That was the guys I dated. I was and still am the peacemaker, but maybe because I'm a Libra. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Angie, I'm the caretaker for sure. And I know it's exhausting, isn't it, Angie? Yeah. The comedian. Some people became the comedian. I especially see this in the men that I work with, because a lot of them, may have been really tall or bigger. And so to keep from being bullied, they became, a comedian, the class clown. So they wouldn't have to feel the vulnerability of feeling their feelings, So sometimes that happens is they didn't want to be seen, the way that they were feared people might see them or what have you. They learned to get attention. Jim Carrey is one. He says it to cover up his pain, you know, to make his mom smile. You might have been the strong one. That was me. I was the strong one in being good, and then I was the strong one in being bad. So that was me. That is a bird by Jean Ahmed. Want English speaking. Okay. Well, that's what we're doing here. That's what you get, because my Spanish is not pretty. I rap, you're the observer. I like that. Yes. Yes. So sometimes people become the rescuer. I also was the rescuer there for a while. We talk about that when there's love and logic. I often recommend to clients when they're bringing up kids and you've got the rescuer, the helicopter parent, and all of this. So we teach our kids that somebody's always going to rescue them or be the helicopter parent so they don't learn how to handle problems themselves. I am from Fort Worth, Texas, but I'm sitting near beautiful Cancun with the air conditioner on because it's hot out there. I done been walking to the store this morning. It's hot. So they were intelligent responses to environments where we may have experienced. So those positions that we learned, those characters that we took on were, how we might have dealt with experience and unpredictability, addiction, emotional absence, criticism, control, conflict, chaos, and inconsistency. And a lot of the people that I work with have a problem dealing, and I did too. So this is why I can help people with it, with conflict and confrontation. With conflict and confrontation. By Jean Ahmed. I'm a mindset coach and a life coach, but there is Duolingo. I work on my Spanish on Duolingo, so you might want to try that. Some learned, if I help, I'm valued, right? If I help other people, then I'm valued. And, this could have came from childhood. It could have come from church, because a lot of people were taught not to consider themselves at all. There are non-personality types. Yeah, thank you, IRAP. Yes, and we can switch and alter in between all of them. Churchill. Yes, I have heard of that word. Thank you. So we're talking about boundaries this morning. Greetings, Edomor, from the Holy Land. So some learned, if I help, I'm valued. Some learned, if I perform, I'm enough. A lot of people are trying to be enough. That's an exercise that I give people, and I wasn't the first one. A lot of coaches give people that exercise because a lot of human beings struggle with feeling like enough. Some learned, if I stay quiet, I stay safe. That's not this channel if I was in a mod, but there's probably some channels where you could practice your English. And there's also apps and everything else. So some learned, and that's all I'm going to say about that, okay? Because we're talking about boundaries this morning. So if I make everyone else comfortable, maybe I won't be rejected, right? A lot of us fear rejection. Some learned, if I become useful, needed, funny, strong, or successful, maybe I will finally feel secure. There's an odd part of that too, because I knew that I had the capacity to feel successful, but I was afraid to feel successful because I was afraid in my codependency to leave people behind. So typically what I did was my success was lifting others up while I kept staying behind. That's the truth, y'all. I had to work on that codependency. So if I become useful, needed, funny, strong, or successful, maybe I will finally feel secure, right? Those things, those characters, those were parts of those characters that we learned to play, people we became, so that we could fit in, so that we could be accepted and not rejected. So those adaptations, you are very welcome, IRAP. So those adaptations often helped us as children, but what protected us then may be exhausting us now. Right, Angie? Right, Dawn? Right, it's exhausting. Pam, Kim, it's exhausting. As adults, the same patterns can show up as, so these were patterns we learned as children to stay safe. Because when your central nervous system's in overdrive, there's a sense of trying to feel safe. That's when we say, I'm trying, but we don't know what we're trying to do. We're trying to just be accepted, but you're already accepted. You're just not accepting yourself. That's it. That's all. I wasn't, anyway. As adults, these same patterns can show up as codependency, people pleasing, over functioning, perfectionism, lack of boundaries. Oftentimes, perfectionism can get people paralyzed because they're afraid to do anything if they can't do it perfect. That's part of that. Because fear drives the central nervous system. Wolverine, Jason. Hello, Jason from Peru. I'm American. Robbie's down under too. That is so cool. I love us getting to meet. Us getting to meet. Imagine meeting you here. Yes, overdrive bit, like being on a roller coaster. Absolutely. You know what? Before I started realizing that all of this was going on inside of me, I used to talk about getting a tattoo before I got tattoos. And one of them, I didn't get it. And I'm glad that I didn't because I've certainly dealt with my share of grief. But was the comic and the tragic. I used to want that because I thought this just happens to me. But it was something that I had learned to perform also. It was part of that arts. The comic and the tragic is often known for theater. And that chaos and happiness was in my theater, joy and pain. So overfunctioning, is a trait that we might have picked up. Perfectionism, lack of boundaries, because we didn't learn boundaries. Fear of conflict, because we might have seen or not seen people fighting when they had disagreements. Emotional suppression, like I said, telling you your feelings aren't true when you're wanting to cry or you feel a way that isn't pleasing to somebody else. It might be uncomfortable for them, and they might just tell you what you need to be feeling instead of recognizing your feelings. Angie, my daughter and I are pretty codependent, and I try and make up for the past and my neglect of her by giving her too much of my money, and I suffer financially. I'm changing that AS. I hope so, Angie, because yeah, those are tough lessons with our daughters. And I had hoped one time I signed something for my daughter because I had understandably upset her. And so she told me that she was going to do one thing if I signed these papers. So I signed the papers because I thought she was going to do that. And I thought that it would heal our relationship. And it meant that I didn't get any money for something that I deserved money for. It was what it was. So it did not help our relationship because the damage was already done. All we can do is make a living amends. We don't need to keep apologizing over and over. Of course, we make mistakes. We don't need to be apologizing over and over. We can't fix it like that. We are trying to fix it doing the living amends. And a living amends is not doing it anymore and recognizing what we did, saying we regret our behavior, and making a point not to repeat that same behavior again. Anyway, later, as it turned out, is she still did the same thing that I was trying to help her not do, and it didn't make her like me anymore because I signed the paper. It did not make us closer, you know. So, and my friends had tried to tell me that, but I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't listen. But I learned. I did learn. And so the next time I got the opportunity to sign or not sign papers, I signed that I would get something. I wouldn't sign papers unless I was going to get something. Because my daddy used to tell me, and I didn't understand. My dad used to say a lot of things that I thought were, because he could be verbally abusive. But he used to tell me when I would be trying to have all this power and control, because I did at 14, I was manipulative. And he would tell me, girl, you're wet behind the ears. And I would think, he don't know. He's just drunk and feeling sorry for himself. He was drunk feeling sorry for himself, and I was wet behind my ears. We were both telling the truth. I know. And that's the thing is I have a friend that she says the same thing about her daughter. And, the real reality is, Angie, is that you may not ever have that relationship with your daughter that you dream of. I don't. I can tell you, I don't have this dreamy relationship, but I do know that she ain't bucking up to me and that she's not like breaking my things and she's not being mean to me. She does respect me when she does see me or talk to me. She doesn't try to do those things to me anymore because I just don't tolerate it. As much as I love her, that's being abused is not spiritual, you know. That's what my therapist told me is being abused is not spiritual. So I hope that these will help you, you know, and that you'll learn how to slowly but surely stand up for yourself. I didn't, stand up for my daughter like that. That's a part of the healing process. Is I just decided I told her and her dad one day, I said, I can't I can't live like this. And if this continues, I'm leaving. And it continued and I left. That's what happened. So then she got mad at me because we'd always been close before is even well, always wasn't really true because there was times when she got mad at me before. But she had lived with me for 18, 20 years, the longest anybody's ever lived with me, right? Anyway, let's get back to this. This is another story time. Sapalil Samrat. But I can tell you that once, she's got to go through her changes, challenges, and chapters. I can't heal her from my pain when she's an adult. All I can do is acknowledge that the pain was there. And I do acknowledge that. I have told her, you didn't exactly have good role models. You know, try to be as honest as I can when these subjects come up because she didn't have good role models. Mm-mm. I was not a good role model all the time. I wasn't a bad role model. I was home. I was present, but I wasn't always strong. I wasn't always, we're human beings. We're fallible, and I'm not excusing myself. But we can't let people walk over us and keep, we can't. I know for me and my friend, she's like, I don't know what's wrong with these girls. And I'm like, we taught them they were more important than we are. And I do know that I taught my daughter she's more important than I am. But I did also have to teach her it's not acceptable for you to, yell at me and break my things and buck up to me because I want a loving relationship with my daughter. I'm not willing to accept that other relationship because that's not good for her or me, you know, because it only brings more guilt on her. Because I know it probably does not make her feel good to do that. I'd like to think that it doesn't make her feel good when that happens. She might feel good for a few minutes, just like I used to, but it doesn't. Our soul knows. So, Robbie, hi, Angie. My daughter just tried the same thing. I've recently been inspired to set some boundaries. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you. Thank y'all both. So sometimes we have low self-esteem, over responsibility, and we stay too long in unhealthy situations, right? So this is why healing is not about judgment. We don't want to judge ourselves. We don't need to judge them. I love my daughter is brilliant, bold, and beautiful. She is. And so I get to know that about her, even though we may not be on terms, that I would prefer us to be, you know. I would like us to be in a better place than we are, but this is the journey to get into that place, maybe. It doesn't mean that it's never going to happen. And I pray about it, but I can't change her. All I can do is change me. And I think that she probably knows that I'm here if she decides she wants to work on that. But if she doesn't, she is not obligated. We talked about obligation and appreciation. A lot of people think that their children are obligated to behave and act a certain way. Well, when they're grown, no, they are not obligated. They are not. Not in my opinion, not in my thought. A lot of people probably would disagree with me, but I don't think so. My daughter learned boundaries when I was learning boundaries, and she told me a long time ago, she's like, Mom, I am not taking care of you when you get old. And that's okay. That's okay. To let people be who they are. I let her be who she is, and I love her very much. Hard love is not bad, setting your boundaries. No, it's not. You got to love yourself because sometimes when we teach people how to treat us, if we do let them treat us poorly and it hurts, we don't need to keep subjecting ourselves to that pain over and over. just try to make that living's amends to where you don't do it again. So, and learn, this is why healing isn't about judgment. It's about awareness, compassion, and discernment. See, judgment keeps us in that victim villain stance. Discernment keeps us in, this is what I want to have for this relationship. That you have a part in what you want to have in the relationship, Angie. That you have what do you want? That's up for consideration. And if it can't be met, then maybe not now doesn't mean not ever. This is what I've had to learn. And I have to tell myself sometimes when I get impatient is that, look, I didn't get to be this age and the everything fall out from under me. And it's not gonna fall out from under me. It's not. So it's always gonna work out. And when I look back, most of the time I did get a lot of the things that I wanted. And as a human being, it might or might not have been the best thing for me, but I got to learn. It's lessons to blessings. That's what it is. So learning to recognize which survival patterns are still running our adult lives, because we do. You are very welcome, darling. I'm so glad that you're here this morning. I'm glad all of you are here this morning. I thank you so much. So the goal is not to become someone else. You don't need to become anyone else. We already did that with all those different roles that we learned to play to be safe. Pam, yes, we have some times where my daughter gets upset with me, but thankfully she also shows me when I'm crossing boundaries and being too controlling too. I think we would butt heads because I was a teen mom. I know, Pam, but see, you know that. And it sounds like that she accepts that too. That you can have those loving relationships. We are going to butt heads with people. We cannot get along with people 100% of the time, usually. If we have space, we might be able to. If you have a good amount of space, then when you get together, you appreciate that time together. But when you're in relationships with people day in and day out, it's not about performing to be what they need you to be all the time. It's about negotiating with each other and having the care, being secure within yourself so that you can care genuinely for somebody else with empathy. So in story 1, we have 2 stories because I know that I got male and masculine and feminine here, and so some people relate that way. Sometimes I think that I have, I think I have some strength like in the warrior masculinity. So we could get into all that, but we're not. So I tell 2 stories for the masculine to identify with and the feminine. Yeah, we do have our times. I know, Pam. I hope that my daughter and I will have our times too, and we do. So, sometimes she talks to me, sometimes she doesn't. I cherish the times when she does, but when she doesn't, I know that she's probably going through things that I can't fix. I'll reach out to her on occasion, and when she don't reach out back, I don't go tripping. I'm not tripping because I know she's got her own life, she's got her own things, and so she needs to do whatever she needs to do, and process it the way she needs to process it. My daughter is 31 years old, big pineapple under the sea. Angie T. I'm in my masculine too much, just freaking surviving. I'm so sick of it. I know. I was too. And I am sometimes. I have the capacity to go there. I do. So here's our stories this morning. Y'all ready for this? Here we go. Thank you for the hearts. Is that Kim or Pam? So, first one, we're starting with a woman, female. She's overwhelmed. She's exhausted. So see if you picture yourself or you relate with this, and let me know in the comments. And I may not get to it right away, but we're going to go process these. She's overwhelmed. She's exhausted. She's tired. She's frustrated, and she's emotionally drained. She feels like she does everything. You are so right. Nobody. Yeah. Pam, your daughter's 40. I know. Yeah. We have to hope that they come back around. Thank you helps Kat. Let me take a drink of water and let's take a breath and then we'll get back into the story. I love the water. Okay. So this lady, she feels the overwhelmed. She feels like she does everything. She carries the emotional load in her marriage, her home, and family. She takes on everybody's stuff. And she often feels responsible for everyone's comfort, needs, schedules, emotions, and well-being. She apologizes all the time apologizing. Even when she has done nothing wrong, she just like barely bumps into some, oh, I'm sorry. We can say, excuse me, but we get used to saying, I'm sorry. Even when she's done nothing wrong, she feels guilty easily. Robbie, when we all learn about respecting each other's boundaries, things will pan out. Absolutely. She feels guilty easily. We talk about in childhood how we might have received unearned guilt, so that we may be carrying that into adulthood. We don't just get rid of it until we process it. She fears she's not doing anything, she's not doing enough. She always feels like she needs to do more. She needs to do more. Or that she's not doing things right. Right? She rarely asks for help because somewhere inside her, she believes it's easier to do it herself. Asking feels uncomfortable, and her needs may be an inconvenience to others. So at the same time, she quietly resents how much she's carrying. She complains to one of her friends, I do so much and nobody seems to appreciate me. She feels unseen, unheard, undersupported, and her friend gently asks her, oh, Bonda buyers. Yes, that is hard. That's very hard. I'm glad that you finally learned some boundaries, because boundaries are peace filled, right? We find our peace when we learn how to set boundaries, loving boundaries. They're peaceful. They're not about fighting. They're peaceful. Sometimes the boundaries we set are with ourselves, so we're not trying to fix and rescue other people. She feels unseen, unheard, undersupported. Her friend gently asks her, have you ever considered that people may not even realize what you need because you never communicate it clearly? I've been asked to talk about communication next week too. We'll be talking about that. So her friend suggests that she sees a coach that she's been seeing. At first, she's hesitant, but eventually she begins coaching. She gets started in the coaching. There she begins to learn something important, that she doesn't have to have a support problem. She can get support. She don't have to have a problem with that. She has a boundary problem. She has a support problem. She has a boundary problem. She realizes she spent much of her life over functioning, anticipating needs, rescuing, and caretaking. She begins learning to set gentle, loving boundaries with herself first. I'm not going to subject myself to this. I'm not going to subject myself to somebody who yells at me, who throws things, who gets mad at me for nothing, and I don't even know what I did. She begins learning to set the loving boundaries with herself first. Boundaries such as, I do not have to overfunction to be valuable, right? I do not have to earn rest. I'm allowed to ask for help. Makes others feel good. They feel good when they're asked for help, right? I do not need to rescue everybody. You can't rescue everybody. We can't. I know, Longbone, but when we look within ourselves, sometimes we have that. See, that's about healing where we've been victimized by that, so that we can heal that victimization and not feel like a victim in adulthood. And I'm not saying we do the same things that they do. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, though, that sometimes we're trying to not have those things happen, that we don't even get to live at the full capacity of who we are. you know? So she practices small changes. She begins communicating more clearly with her husband. Instead of hinting, resenting, and overfunctioning, she begins using direct language. She asks for help. She delegates. She lets coworkers participate. She tolerates the discomfort of not controlling everything. Slowly, she experiences something unfamiliar: relief, support, freedom, not all at once, but gradually. It doesn't just all come at once because those things didn't get taken away. You had those things at some point in your life, or maybe not support, but you know how to do these things at one point in your life. But gradually, getting it back, right? Street angels, indoor devils, Dawn. That was my life with my dad sometimes. Parrot's good. Thank you, Safa Young. Where is he? It's in the kitchen, probably. Somewhere around here. So we want freedom. Boundaries give you freedom. That's what they give you. Is that you're not going to not be friended by other people. In fact, your friends are going to respect you more for setting boundaries. She begins understanding that boundaries are not rejection. They're self-respect. And that appreciation feels much different than obligation, you see. Because sometimes we learned how to feel obligated in our childhoods, that if somebody does something nice for you, you have to overdo something for them. You have to go beyond, right? What they did. Comparing, competition, they come from the same root. So y'all ready for story number 2? Let's take a deep breath. Did any of y'all relate with that one? Deep breath. Hold it. And release. Into story 2, the loyal employee. A man loves his work. He's hardworking, capable, dependable, and deeply committed. The boss initially appreciates him. He feels fulfilled. He enjoys contributing, helping to build something meaningful, and being a part of a growing business. He doesn't make a great deal of money, but his boss occasionally supported him with bonuses when needed. He feels valued, seen, and trusted. And as the companies grow, his responsibilities grow too. He becomes the go-to person. He feels proud of his role. He enjoys being reliable and capable. He trains others, works long hours, takes on more and more. And because he loves what he does, he rationalizes the increasing demands. Yep, Robbie relates. But eventually, something shifts. He begins feeling less appreciated, less included, less respected. New people are hired. Some he personally trained. Yet he feels increasingly overlooked. Some of the new people get recognized more. And he's like overlooked. So his responsibilities continue growing, but his sense of value begins shrinking. He senses something's off, but he dismisses his own intuition. At Christmas, he's given a large bonus. So this temporarily reassures him. He feels appreciated again, or so he thinks. Then it comes review time. He discovers his title has been removed. Some of his responsibilities he once felt so proud of are reassigned. Hi, Ashley. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, Robbie, I know. Kanavid Gwani, hello. So some of his responsibilities he once felt so proud of are reassigned. No meaningful conversation happened beforehand, just all of a sudden. He's like blindsided. No transparency, no inclusion. The boss he once enjoyed building with has grown distant. The boss has grown distant. communicates less, and seems increasingly controlling. This dismissiveness had already begun earlier, though. Comments become flippant, minimizing, dismissive. Credit is increasingly given to others while his contributions are forgotten or overlooked. He feels like an afterthought, second-guessed, replaceable. The boss becomes increasingly superior, controlling, and emotionally dismissive, and not only with him, but with others as well. Expectations rise while respect declines. He begins second-guessing himself, and he minimizes his own feelings, rationalizes behaviors, because we need our jobs, right? Questions whether he's overreacting. But deep down, he knows something is no longer healthy. He feels trapped. The bottom now feels like obligation. The bonus now feels like an obligation. The bonus feels like an obligation, like he's stuck. Debt keeps him financially stuck. He realizes he's no longer staying because he loves his work. He's staying from fear, obligation, and self-abandonment. Eventually, he reaches a turning point. He realizes his peace matters. His dignity matters. His self-esteem matters. He can't continue sacrificing his mental and emotional well-being. Even without another job lined up, even without a perfect plan, he makes the difficult decision to leave. Not impulsively, but from clarity. He realizes boundaries aren't always asking others to change. Sometimes boundaries are what we're willing to remove ourselves from, and he chose himself. He chose peace. He chose self-respect. And in so doing, he begins trusting himself also again. So, I've talked about self-trust. Learning to have boundaries is about self-trust. Ashley, I'm good. How are you? So in closing, and I want to hear your thoughts on these two stories. In closing, both stories teach the same lesson. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about clarity, about getting clarity, not being confused. If we don't have boundaries, we're going to be confused. They're about having self-respect. They're about discernment, about where we're not judging anybody else to try to be seen, and learning to listen to ourselves. Hello, Jason. Sometimes loving boundaries are spoken. Sometimes loving boundaries are behavioral. Sometimes loving boundaries require difficult decisions. But all healthy boundaries begin with one thing: listening inward, listening to yourself. Thank you, Pam. I appreciate that. Listening inward, learning to trust what we already know, and honoring ourselves enough to respond accordingly. Because boundaries are not barriers of love or to love. They're a part of what makes love, respect, peace, and healthy connections sustainable. I hear Croatia's beautiful. David. Both of these individuals were simply struggling with boundaries. They were living out adaptations, patterns that once made sense, strategies that once helped them to survive, belong, avoid pain, gain approval, and reduce chaos or feel needed. This is why healing is not about judgment. We're not going to judge ourselves or anyone else. Thank you, Wolverine. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Pam. This is why healing is not about judgment. It's about awareness, compassion, and discernment, and learning new ways of relating to ourselves and to others. What once protected us may no longer serve us. It might have worked at one time. And see, the thing is sometimes there were these beautiful moments. Thanks, Wolverine. There were these beautiful moments. Thank you, Pam. I appreciate that. You're beautiful inside and out. I'm a reflection. Angie, my daughter suffers with people playing friends and gets hurt, so hurt. I wish I could help, but it's up to her to walk away when she's had enough. Absolutely. Absolutely. It does become painful when we can't protect our adult children anymore. It is painful. And just learning new ways to relate to ourselves and relate to others, you know. So boundaries often become one of the ways we begin honoring the adult version of ourselves while gently healing the child who learned to survive this way. We're not going to judge our parents because we learned to survive this way, because let's think they probably did the best that they could with what they knew. And they too were running away, running too, because that's what our central nervous system does when we're going in flight, fight, and freeze. We're either running away or running to, or either numbed down completely. That's what happens. That's what happens. So, I hope that this has been a helpful story for you all today. Was there parts that you want to talk about how you related with, before we get into the breathing? I want to thank you all for being here this morning. It means a lot to me for you all to show up for story time and to share where a lot of these relate with you, to give me that input, because we're here. I love that we're building a community here, because we're here to love and support one another, and not to judge each other, but to learn to love and support each other. That's why we create this safe community, and it takes a village. So thank y'all, because I feel like I'm loved and supported too. I like that story. We must take care of ourselves. Yes, Vonda Byers, absolutely. And I know that on a Sunday morning you could be doing a lot of things, but you're sitting here with me and the story time, and I just appreciate you so much. They did. My parents tried the best they could. They do. They do. And we are all just trying to play grown up oftentimes, just by the models that we had of what we don't want or we do want. And so sometimes finding harmony in between is having the boundaries with ourselves so that we can feel comfortable having boundaries with someone else. Grinch is in his house there. Grinchy, what you doing? Your fans are wanting you. Y'all want me to get Grinch to come out? Kim, Pam, what am I going to do to get the Grinch out? Do y'all want to tell, right? What do I do to get the Grinch to come out? So when you're feeling like you're overlooked and you're feeling like, there's nothing else you can do and you're feeling completely defeated, you could try emotional freedom technique. What emotional freedom technique is, that's what I eventually learned about my dad. He meant well with his bad temper. His dad left him when he was only 10, and there were a few brothers to help raise. Yes, and Kim knows how we're going to get the Grinch out. He is in his cage. There is a bird cage hanging from my ceiling. That one has a cardinal in it. Because what, Kim? Cardinals are signs that our loved ones are still with us, right? So that bird cage hanging from the ceiling has not a real cardinal, but a cardinal, because you don't find cardinals down here in Mexico, okay? There ain't no cardinals down here that I've seen. So I've got a cardinal in that bird cage that's hanging from the ceiling, but I have a parrot in this bird cage behind me. Well, he might not come out with the breathing. We know, Pam and Kim know, he's going to come out if I start tapping. He has some control issues. The bird has some control issues. So here we go. I feel so defeated sometimes. I just feel like nothing I ever do is good enough. See, I told y'all. And when I feel like nothing I ever do is good enough, I just want to cry. I just want to get mad. Sometimes it feels okay to blame somebody else, because sometimes other people try to steal my thunder. Sometimes I just don't feel seen. And it hurts my feelings when I don't feel seen. And I might want to do something good to feel seen. And I might want to do something bad to feel seen. But even if I do those things, I still don't have harmony. Because I still feel bad. Because I consider other people's feelings. What are they going to think about me? Are they going to reject me? What I really want to be is accepted. but I haven't learned how that feels. So when I don't know how to be accepted, I don't know how to act. I don't know which character to be. But I love and forgive myself for just simply not knowing. Because underneath it all, I remember who I am. I know I'm a good person. I tell myself a good person. I'm a good person. And I forgive myself for when I think any less. I'm a human being. I'm just as good as anyone else and just as bad as anyone else. I can be who I want to be. I deserve to be me. I deserve to be free because I'm worthy, I'm valuable, and I am divine. And this life is mine. So that's tapping, y'all. I know it's weird. It's weird at first. See, they wanted to see you. They wanted to see you. Yeah, Grinch has boundaries too. Grinch will bite somebody. Grinch will bite you if you get in Grinch's way. I know he did come right away, didn't he, Pam? A hood parrot. I don't know. But yeah, okay. Well, yeah. Yeah, they wanted to see you, baby bird. They wanted to see you. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yep. Yep, they wanted to see you today. Yeah, you had to make an appearance. Yes, you did. You needed to make an appearance. Look at all those hearts you get. Look at all those hearts. You ready to breathe? He's in breathing position, y'all. Y'all ready to breathe? Y'all ready for this? You ready to breathe, Grinch? Okay. All right, y'all. I love y'all. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you're going to have a wonderful week after this. Thank you, Angie. So let's breathe. We're going to do 5 breaths if you're new here. I think most of us are relative here. We are all relative here. Pammy says, hi, Grinchy. They're so happy you come out. Fund buyers. You are very welcome. You are very welcome. Thank you for being here. I know, right, Robbie? We're going to have to do the DNA. All right. So let's just breathe in that peace that we've been talking about, the peace and the boundaries of knowing you are enough and being aligned with ourself, cells and soul. So let's breathe that in because the breath, the way that we're breathing, we're going to breathe in all the way to our tummy. Our shoulders will rise. Our head will be held high. The breath's going to be flowing easily into our body. Our heart will open. And then we're going to hold that. Hold how that feels, the calm, the peace for 4 counts, I mean. And then we're going to release gently and slowly. Okay? Now, if you can't hold it that long, that's okay. Just do your best. Breathe, darling. What's this say before I start breathing? All right. So here we grow. We're gonna. What it does, this breath, is it regulates and regenerates. It regulates your divine mind, gets you in touch with knowing everything's safe and okay right now. It gets those chemicals flowing, healthy in your body. That's always you have these chemicals, these things firing off, right, Pam and Kim? There's so much going on in your body you don't even know. But when you're breathing, it helps to put you in that divine flow. So it helps regenerate your cells and it helps to regulate your central nervous system, your lungs, your heart, and your digestive system. All right, Satan Mogila. Hello in Russia. We are more than enough. You're exactly right, Robbie. So here we grow. All right, we'll quit talking about it and be about it. Let's do it. So take a deep breath in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. I hear wind chimes and trees blowing. Hold it. And release. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Just 2 more. Breathe. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Yes, you are worthy, Pam. You are. That's right. You are worthy, valuable, and divine. So I hope you all are going to have, look at that, my hair. What's going on there? But I hope y'all are going to have a wonderful week. Again, I thank you all so much for being here. I'll be back on here tomorrow night. I do have in my notes to talk about these things this week. We are going to talk about, I'm going to have to study today this borderline personalities and boundaries with borderline personalities because Rodolfo had asked me about that. And Kim had asked me about how to better communicate with each other. So we'll talk about that this week. And I had written down about forgiveness, judgment and discernment, and boundaries with forgiveness. Because a lot of times we can go crazy with forgiveness, and forgiveness seems to be a big deal right now. So we're going to talk about that too. Yes, you have an amazing day too, Pam, Kim, Robbie, Angie, everybody. Y'all have an amazing day. I sure do appreciate you. And also, Vonda, thank you. And I appreciate all your participation today. Okay. Oh, my daughter has done a lot of training and studies about borderline personalities. I'm still learning about that. Very cool. I'm going to be studying it today. Thank y'all so much. All right. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Y'all have a super Sunday. All righty. Thanks so much.